So far in this series, you've learned to draw a girl wearing a swimsuit who's a brunette. For this lesson, what we're going to work on is doing a white dress shirt, jeans, suede shoes, blonde hair. For this first video, we're going to be doing all of the coloring for our girl. So you're going to want to have your light sand pink as well as craft brown. For the white shirt, we're going to be using frost blue. For the denim pants, we're going to be using electric blue. You're also going to want to have your clear blender and a recollections marker for doing some corrections in the end. Now in this video, I'm going to focus on just color and texture. In the previous swimsuit video, we talked about taking the bentang paper and then transferring your design onto the paper using your 2H pencil and doing it very, very lightly. So you'll want to already have your jeans and dress shirt already drawn up. Also for our girl, we had come up with a hairstyle. So we were using this method of doing the ovals, coming up with a different hair direction, and then coming up with a final hairstyle for our girl. So that's what I added here to my croquis and then onto the bentang paper. So you're going to want to take care of all of that first. As well, there was the video for how to draw skinny jeans, a romper, and a pair of slacks. So I'd recommend doing this video first and then come in here to start doing the coloring. So here we're taking a look back at the original pencil drawing. So you remember I had some guidelines for doing the collar and the pocket and then showing where the top stitching is going to go and the gathers and everything. Once I came over here to my clean piece of the marker paper, I'm just putting these guidelines in here, or the gathering in here very, very lightly. The buttons, I'm just showing just kind of the bottom half. This top stitching here, I just drew it as a few dots so I know the direction that I'm traveling in. And later on when I ink this, I'll ink these in as longer dashes to look like top stitching. So I just wanted you to get a sense of what I did put onto the marker paper and what I didn't have to put on the marker paper. At this point, you should have taken your white dress shirt and your jeans drawing and then transferred it here to the marker paper. Now, one of the things that's complicated about doing a white dress shirt is the paper itself is already white. So a lot of people are tempted to come in here with like a gray color and start hitting all these gray shadows onto their white shirt. The problem is when you're done, then the shirt itself will look dingy. It'll look like it's old or dirty or something's just not quite right. So for me, 90% of the time when I'm doing something white, I almost never use some kind of a gray for doing the shadows. Personally, what I like to do for a white is whatever the garment is that this is coming with, then whatever the main color is in this is what I'll use on the shadows here. So for instance, today what we're doing is we're going to use this electric blue for doing her pants. And this is going to be denim. And I love electric blue for denim. There's also like a Dutch blue and there's another like cobalt blue that looks really good for denim as well. But for me, I just like the electric blue the best. And then what I'll do is for the shirt, for all the different shadows and stuff, I'm going to use blue again. So then these two pieces will coordinate and they'll have the same kind of blue tones to them. In this instance, what we're going to use is this frost blue. If you'll notice on Chartback, there's also like a blue glow and there's another blue also that's super light. So between those three, you could choose anything that you want. I just happen to like the frost blue. Something else that you're going to want is going to be the clear blender. And this is going to be similar to when we were practicing doing the clear blender in the little squares. What we're going to do is we're going to get the shirt wet with clear blender and then we're going to come in and start hitting shadows with the frost blue. Alright, so let's get started here with coloring this shirt in white. So take out your clear blender and your frost blue, or if you have the blue glow, and let's take both of these lids off. And at this point, I'm going to flip it over now to the back side of the paper. And it's hard to see exactly what's going on, but trust me, as soon as I get this wet with my blender marker, you'll see the pencil through there, no problem. Now with my clear blender, I want to make sure that there's no color on there whatsoever from a previous project. And then with my blue, I just opened the cap for the day, and I just want to dab it on here just in case there's a big drop of ink. Now follow what I'm going to do here first, and then you can do it after. So I'm going to start with doing a sleeve section, and I want everything broken down into sections and puzzle pieces when I do this. So the first thing I want to do is I'm going to get this sleeve completely wet with the colorless blender. And since I started up here at the top of the sleeve, this is where I'm going to come in and start hitting just my shadows with the blue. So wherever there's wrinkles or shadows from the spotlight and inside of the gathers, and then I'm going to leave the rest totally alone. One thing that I forgot to mention is we should know where the light direction is. So remember, I always like to have the light coming here from her right side. So then all of the shadows end up here on the left side, especially for women's wear because a lot of the jackets and stuff overlap towards the left side. So come in here and get your shadow. And if you want, you can reference your mannequin, that's the standing pose mannequin, and it will have the same light direction. And then as we turn this paper over, if you want to go ahead and hit that arrow from the marker side with your marker as a reminder, and then you can come and reference your mannequin here from the flip side. And then I'll lightly just tape her right here to my piece of paper, so I'll always have this reference side by side. So now you can see what I've done on the sleeve right here as it's drying, and then this is the arm. So most of it is just a shadow here on the inside edge of the arm, down here on her hand, but this one, her hand is in her pocket. And mostly I'm emphasizing those gathers here at the sleeve cuff as well as up at the sleeve shoulder. The next thing I want to do is I'll pick another puzzle piece that's away from the sleeve. So I don't want to touch this one yet because I don't want these to bleed into each other. So I'll come up here and let's do this collar. So the collar has two things going on. There's the flat part of the collar that we can see, and there's this little piece going behind and touching into her neck. And it's really difficult to try and isolate them out. So for me, I'm going to get the whole thing all in one shot. So I'm getting the collar and the part that's touching back on her neck. Right down to the front. And then I know there would be some shadows back in here underneath the collar. And then since this is wrapping behind her neck, I would throw a little shadow in here. But for the most part, this collar here is hitting, the spotlight is hitting right onto this collar. So there's not a whole lot of shading that I want to do on this one in particular. Let's come over to the opposite collar. So we'll do the same thing. I'm getting the whole collar that's rolling out. I'm getting the whole thing wet. Again, it's going to be dark back in here where it's touching her neck. And then this collar is in the shade, so I can get more on it like that. more of a shadow on that collar. Let's go ahead and come in here and we'll get this other sleeve. So I just got the sleeve all wet, and I want to come back up here and just get this wet one more time just in case this was slightly starting to dry. And now I can come in here and get my gathers. And this is the sleeve here that's in the shade. So I'll get some shadow all along here by the pocket, the side of her body, down into the elbow area, some wrinkles. A little bit on the outside edge. And then I spent a lot of time talking, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to get this wet here with some more of the clear blender before I start to come back in with my blue and emphasize these wrinkles and the gathers. Now this side of the main body of her shirt is here in the spotlight, so there's going to be tons of light hitting it, maybe a little bit of a shadow from her bust. But for the most part, there's just a lot of light on this, going all the way up into the button placket. There will be some shadowing here where the collar is flopping over and casting a shadow onto the body. That'll be one of the darkest spots. And then I have a few little wrinkles down here in the waist area. Now, since it's such a large section, if I want to, I can go ahead and start getting my shadows as I continue going down with the clear blender. And even if a large area has no shadow color at all, you still want to cover it with the clear blender, just in case the clear blender is slightly changing. Just in case the clear blender is slightly changing the color of your paper, you're going to want to make sure that it's changing for the whole entire puzzle piece. Now, since there's a button placket, I can come over and I can get this other side of the shirt. Keep in mind that this is the going to be the darker side. So look at what's going on here on the body as you come in to start doing this shirt here. And for the pocket, what I'll do is I'll leave it totally, completely white, and I'll come in and I'll shadow that separately. So again, I can get a section wet first, and then I can come in and throw in my shadows. And then continue getting it wet with the clear blender, moving down. And this is the side where her shirt overlaps, so we need to have some kind of a shadow from the overlapping on her shirt going all the way down. And then it's tucking into her jeans, so you would show it tucking in right there. Any other wrinkles and any other shadows from this side of the body. So here I've zoomed out a little bit so it's easier for you to see the whole garment all the way through. Again, this is all the shadow side, so this is where her shirt is overlapping. I got some shadows from the pocket, in her waist, on her arm. And then there's some shadow underneath the collar, this side of the collar, in behind her neck, underneath the collar, inside of there. Now underneath the collar up in here, there's going to be the collar stand. So I want to come in and shadow those separately. And then all along the placket here, there's these buttons. So I want to get this wet and I want to show a cast shadow for every button. And then we'll come down into the cuffs and we'll make them look like they're rounding off like a cylinder. So here we have, this is the collar stand. I'm doing it separately. Every time you do something separately, it gives it a little sense of that it's a separate puzzle piece. And I'll come down here and I'll get the placket wet for the full distance, even though I'm only doing a shadow for each button. I still want to get that full placket wet with clear blender. And then I'll do my shadows. And while I'm waiting for the placket and the collar to dry, I'll come in here and we'll get a cuff. So basically, I'll just get the whole cuff wet. And I'll treat it like I'm drawing a cylinder. So there'd be a shadow, basically just on both sides. This one here is a cylinder, but we can see inside of it, so it's similar to your collar. So where I can see inside the cuff, I'll make that dark. And then where the cuff is rounding off, I'll make it look like it's turning the corner. Very similar to when we made it dark behind her neck up here at the collar. And now that this collar is dry, I'm going to get this other collar stand, so underneath where the collar's rolling over, plus the shadow for the button. Now that I've let it dry, for the sake of the video, I want you to be able to see where her neck is and where her hands are. So I'm going to go ahead and get a wash right up to her chin. And I'll do my shadowing on her neck. Put just a little pink on there. Same thing that I did on the swimsuits. And then while it's semi-wet, I'll start to get my shadows without any harsh brush strokes. I'll let that dry a little bit and I'll come down here and I'll get her hand for the first wash. Making sure to keep her thumbnail white if I want to add a cool color to it later. So again, while it's wet, I'll throw just a little bit of pink here on her thumb, the top of her hand. We'll come back to the neck here now that it's semi-dry. Start to work on some harder cast shadows. And we can start on this other hand here that's going into the pocket. Just put a little pink on there for fun. I'll get some shadows here on this hand while it's semi-dry. I'll come back onto her neck. This is for a third time. This hand here, I'll get a shadow basically from her cuff. It's casting a shadow, and then her hand is going into her pocket. And then this one's again semi-dry. I'll just come and emphasize a little bit more. So again, I know it's probably a little bit difficult to see in the video, but here I have all of my cast shadows on her white dress shirt, as well as I went ahead and put a base layer and some shading for her neck and hands. And then you can see I'm following the similar shadows to what's going on for the mannequin. Something that I did not do some kind of a bust shadow, because realistically, if this is a tailored dress shirt, it pulls right across her bust nice and smooth. There might be a little bit of a shadow here below it. But I've noticed in the past, the more and more I try to emphasize some kind of a bust, it just doesn't quite work on a shirt. Especially over here, we kind of have this fake three-quarter view looking kind of bust in a bust pocket, so I think that already emphasizes it enough. So taking a look here from the front, you'll notice that all of that blue you put on there, it doesn't show very much. So you can see that everything you're doing here is a lot darker than what you want, because when you flip it back over, it's a lot lighter than you thought. Now that this is all bone dry, if I want, I could still come in with my frost blue with this dry and no blender, and I can come in and just hit a few key spots that would be the darkest. Back here where her collar is behind her neck, it's just these little tiny puzzle pieces. We can go ahead and we can hit those with the marker totally dry. Another one is here where we can see inside the cuff of her cuff. Let's go ahead and get that one dark. So again, it's just this little tiny puzzle piece right here. Looking into the cuff of her shirt. Now when we're looking at the gathers here at the cuffs, I want to go into just a few of these gathers to the most deepest points and just throw a little bit of a shadow in there. It's just a few of those spots. So down in there, inside of there. And then the same thing is going on up in the sleeve cap. Just a few little dark spots. And don't get too crazy with it. So now let's see what that looks like from the front. So you can see I've just darkened in the caps on her sleeves, behind her neck right there, as well as the gathers here on the cuffs, inside the cuff right there. Now something that I would like to do is I want to make this pocket look a little darker going inside the pocket, but I don't want to have a sharp edge. So I'm going to just lightly get this wet with some clear blender and do one more swipe of the blue. So watch me first. So I'm going to have the clear blender touching the main body and go right up to the edge of the pocket. So basically I'm just getting this wet one more time. And I'm coming out to where it's totally clean and white. And then I'll come in and I'm hitting just at the edge of the pocket. Just one more time to really make it look like your hand can go inside that pocket. And then as it's drying, you can see here what's going on from the front. So it's clear blender coming all the way up into this area, right down to the edge of the pocket. I would also like to emphasize that this layer is on top of this layer here. So that layer goes under, this layer goes over. So I'm going to get this wet one more time with clear blender, and then I'm going to get some blue again right up against that edge. So here we are, this is the shadow side, so it's this side of the shirt now. So I'm going to use my clear blender, and I'm going to get this wet all the way right up against that placket, and then out onto the white shirt with the clear blender. And now I'm going to hit right along that placket only. Just right along that edge. So I'm stacking that blue for a second time, but I'm still using clear blender so it'll bleed out nice and smooth. Now that that's dry, for each little button, I want to come in with the dry marker, and I'm going to just hit one more time and get a nice, crisp, hard shadow. And remember where your light is coming from this direction, so the shadow is just on the underside of each one of these going that direction. So it's each button. I just want to emphasize the shadow side. And don't forget, you have one more button way up here underneath the collar. I also want to get just a couple little wrinkles here inside the pit of the wrinkle, as well as over here. So I'm just hitting it with a dry marker just inside the wrinkle part. Now that everything's dry, up here in the collars, where the collar is folding over the shirt, I want to really get some shadow inside of that. Again, this shadow is going to touch out here onto the main body of the shirt. So what I want to do is, I want to get the shirt wet with clear blender, because it's going to come out onto the white. And I'm going again right up into that collar. And then I come in here and I'm stacking my blue for a second time. And the clear blender is going to help let it to bleed out onto the white shirt a little bit. And I can do the same thing over here. Just to emphasize the white collar folding over. Now that it's dry, let's go ahead and take a look at it here from the front. And you can see the shirt still looks very white with just these little hints of blue shadows. And then later on what we're going to do is we're going to add some texture to this with color pencil, and we'll ink it out and it'll be perfect. Let's move on now to start talking about doing her denim jeans. So taking a look here from our handout from the back view, so we were analyzing different pair of jeans with the pockets and everything. But if you take a look at these jeans here, these are more of like an acid wash jean. To do something like this, I would be laying down clear blender and mixing it with my jean color, and I would purposely be getting brush strokes in certain areas to make it look a little more distressed and uneven. This pair of jeans here, what I would want is I would want one smooth, even wash of a base layer, and then I would come in semi-wet and start to get all the different cast shadows in there. So this is a little bit easier to do, so let's go ahead and try this for our first time doing denim. Following the light direction here from her right side, come down to the jeans area and let's put another arrow in here as a reminder. And then when you turn the paper over, come on over here and get your arrow with the marker as well. And that way we'll always remember this is our light source and this is the shadow side. Also, we're going to be referencing here on the model or the mannequin where she's got her leg 3/4 turned out. Now from the wrong side of the paper, we're going to start doing our marker. And what I want to do is let's come down into this waistband and these pockets and puzzle pieces out and let pieces dry as we go before we start doing the wash for each leg. So here we have these little tiny belt loops on here. What you can do is you can go ahead and color right past it. Just go right over the tops of that. And I'm going right over the button and everything. And we'll be able to come back a second time and get those belt loops darker and darker. So while this puzzle piece right here is drying, I'll move on to another puzzle piece that's not touching. Also keep in mind that your blue markers and dark purples and stuff, they're going to bleed out quite a bit. So as you're coloring something, don't quite go all the way up to the line of the pencil because it's going to bleed up into that. And as I move down here close to her hand, I want to rotate the paper so I can keep using the pen tip with control. And again, I'm stopping just a little bit before I get to the hand because I know it's already going to bleed towards it. I'll go ahead and come over here. If you remember on this pocket, there's the pocket facing as well as a coin pocket. So you'll want to break this up into separate pieces as well. So I'm going to go ahead and get the coin pocket first. And we'll let the little coin pocket dry before we come back and get the facing behind there. So I'm going to let this just dry for a minute, and then we'll come and we'll get these two other puzzle pieces here and here. Now that they're dry, I can come in here and I'll get the other side of the waistband. And I'll get the facing here for just above her coin pocket. And we'll let those dry completely. Let's take a look at it here from the front. So even though it was really dark and stainy, you can still clearly see all of your pencil lines here on the front, and you can see where we're going to come in and make the belt loops a little bit darker. Now, one of the things about a dark stainy color like blue is when two dry pieces touch, you're going to get a really dark overlapping brush stroke. Out here in the middle of the fabric, that could be really bad. But up in this area, we actually use it to our advantage. So when we do these in different puzzle pieces, If your ink accidentally bleeds over on top of each other, then it helps to separate them out by giving already somewhat of like a little bit of a shadow break between the two of them. Also, now that we've done these smaller details, once we come in and start to do the wash on our pants, we're also going to get kind of a dark line between them again, which again is going to help separate these out. At this point now, we're ready to come in here and start to do a wash for her leg. Now, since the brush will get, since this blue color will end up having brush strokes if you let it dry too much, as I come down and I want to come back and hit some areas while it's still wet to kind of stack some color, and then I pick up from where I left off, I'm going to get a little bit of a brush stroke. So what I want to do is down here at her knees where there's a few wrinkles, that's where I'll stop temporarily to come back up and hit a few locations and then continue where I left off. So watch me first and then you can do this after. So what we'll do is we'll take her right side of her pants, which will be the lighter side because the spotlight's hitting it. So let's come on over to the marker side, and that'll be this leg right here. So I want to just get a basic idea on the shadows, so it's curving down all along inside this knee and all the way down towards her ankles with the spotlight hitting this side. And then of course on our jeans we have a few little whisker wrinkles inside of here, and this is where her hand is in her pocket. So on the front here I'd just drawn a very small dash in here so I could see how deep her hand goes, and that'll give me a sense of where to come back and hit this a second time. Now once I start up here, I don't mind if I accidentally touch some of this blue right here, because that's going to give me a separation between them as those layers stack and make a nice dark line. But I want to be sure not to bleed up into her hand, so once I come close to her hand, I'll actually leave just a little bit of white, and it'll bleed slowly up towards the hand without going too far. And again, this marker is really stainy, and to not get a brush stroke is incredibly difficult. So make sure your brush strokes are kind of flowing with the shape of her leg, that cylinder shape. And again, I need to do a wash all the way down to the wrinkles at her knees before I come back up and try and get some secondary shadows while it's still wet. So the quicker I move, the better. So here I'm getting close to, this is the area on her knee where there's some wrinkles. So now I can come back up to where her hand is inside that pocket, and I can do a little shadow while it's wet. Some of these whiskers. And this is like menswear jeans, so the extension is on this side of the jeans. And then this is the inside of her pant leg where the shadow would be. And then I need to quickly get back to continuing here. So I'm going to just overlap right on top of this. And the brush strokes that I got from that is going to be part of my wrinkles, so it's okay. And here I just want a nice even wash all the way down to her ankle. And then I'll rotate my paper so I could use the tip of my pen to get right along that hemline. And then I quickly want to come up here, emphasize my knee, side of my leg. While it's still wet. And then up in this area, I can just come up here now. Basically, I'm getting my third shadow with the hard edge. Down into the knee area. Down towards the calf. And along here at the hem, usually the top stitching, there's some kind of distressing or some thickness. So I'm showing like a little bit of a cast shadow from the top stitch indentations going through all that thickness of the denim. Now I'm going to let this dry up a little bit more and I'll get a couple more shadows on her knee, always remembering where the light source is coming from. So these are just the wrinkles. And then these whisker wrinkles here at the crotch level. I'm just emphasizing them one more time. A little bit of a shadow from her hand. I think that's good enough. I'll let this dry completely before I do the other leg. Okay, so now that it's totally dry, let's take a look at it here from the front. I think it looks pretty good. I like the emphasis on her knee and the wrinkles at her knee. I made her kneecap look like it's a little bit too high, and what I'll do is I'll fix that when I come back in with my color pencils. I'll make it look like her kneecap is a little bit lower. But all in all, this looks really good. It's a nice even wash on here with a few of my shadows in there, and this was basically the light side of her pants. So let's go ahead and start working on the dark side of her pants. Now on this mannequin, you don't really see much of a shadow on the underside of her leg here because of the spotlight direction. But on ours, we're going to have that seam right there, this inseam. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to throw a shadow in here, but I'm also going to show that there's a little ridge on that inseam. So I'm going to kind of specify that as we go and then get some shadowing out here on this leg and of course under the knee. And then like I'd mentioned before, where the top stitching is at the bottom hem, this top stitching kind of digs in a little bit because denim is so thick. So I'm just kind of showing some shadows and a little bit of a ridge right here. So I'll make sure to do the same thing. I'll follow along here, leaving the lower part lighter, and above it here, I'll get a little bit darker. All right, so watch me now and I'll come in and I'll do the second wash. So I'll come down to the kneecap area. I know I can stop there. I'll start to work on her whiskers while it's still wet. Some wrinkles here where her hip is buckling. And then this is that inseam right here. So I'm going to leave kind of a hard edge there. And then a little bit of a cast shadow all on this outside leg where the spotlight's not hitting it. And then I quickly need to pick up and keep going here on the leg and finish my wash. Again, I'll flip this around so I can use the tip of my marker to get right to the hem, leaving a little bit of room for my marker to bleed. And then I want to come back up here and continue getting my wrinkles behind her knee. This is the shadow side of her pants. Again, I'll emphasize the shadow side here. This is my third time up in this area, right here where the pocket buckles a little, the whiskers at her crotch level, and then emphasizing this inseam angle right here, that little inseam. And you'll see some more as we get to it later. And this calf muscle here going behind her leg would have a little shadow on that. And then again down here at the hem, I want to emphasize a little shadowing from the top stitch, and this is going above the top stitching. So you can see like the thickness from the top stitching sticking down. So now I'm doing my third layer here on the front edge of her pants. These wrinkles behind her knee. And then emphasizing this inseam just a little bit more. Whiskers. And that's good enough. I'll let that dry completely. And then I'm just taking a second look here down at the leg. Everything looks good. I can see a little bit of the inseam right here and going down right here. I can definitely see what's going on at the knees and then down here at the hem. So turning this over, let's take a closer look here at what's going on at the waistband. Now so far all these little puzzle pieces have only had one wash, and we didn't go back and do anything on them while they're wet. So for instance, down in this area, we were hitting this wet, we were hitting it semi-wet, and then hitting it one more time where it was almost dry, and we already have lots of shadows and edges. We want to get the same thing in here. What I want to do is, this pocket facing here should be darker than everything else, so I'm going to go ahead and just get a second wash straight onto that. And the same thing here. This coin pocket should also be darker than everything else, but these are going to start to disappear into each other. So I'll make this one darker, and then this one I'll just throw a little hard shadow inside of there. And then this waistband, I'll make it a little bit darker than this one, so you could tell that this overlaps on top of that. And then I'll also put a little bit of a shadow here where we could see the belt loops popping out towards us. So we're going to leave those alone at this point. So I'll start over here where it's the coin pocket and the pocket facing. And I'm going to go ahead and just get the pocket facing completely covered one more time. And the coin pocket should just have a little cast shadow here where it's going into the pant. This pocket facing here will be completely covered. And I want to make sure I don't bleed into her hand. So I'll turn this upside down. And I'm leaving a little bit of space so I'm not getting it too close to her hand. Now I can come back up to this waistband. And I want those to dry completely, and then I'll come in and do a few more details on the waistband itself. So now I'm going to get the waistband that's underneath, so that'll be this side. And I come right up to the other layer and get like a shadow on that. A shadow from the belt loop, a little bit of a shadow from her shirt. And this side of the waistband, I want to get a little bit of the shadow from the belt loop as well. And then going around the side of her body, it would be in the shade. Let's take a look at that from the front now, while it's still drying. While I'm letting this dry, I'm going to go ahead and get some skin tone here on the tops of her feet, and then while they're wet, I'll get all my cast shadows in there as well. And let's get our light direction, so it's here from the right side. And then as we turn this over, let's go ahead and use any flesh tone marker that you want to use. So I'm using a light sand. So let's go ahead and get our arrow for the light direction. So again, I'll just lay down a wash. I want it to start to slowly dry. I'll put just a hint of pink on the light side, just to break up that straight one color. Now with it semi-wet, I'm going to get my cast shadow from the hem of her jeans, as well as the shadow side of her foot, as well as her foot going into her shoe. And now that it's dried a little bit longer, I can come in and get my third shadow here, again underneath her pant leg, the side of her foot into the shoe. And what I'll do at this point, I'll let this get totally bone dry, and then I can get a really nice crisp shadow from underneath her pants. I'll come up here to her hand that's bone dry, and I'll get these fingers that are behind her thumb, and a nice crisp shadow from the cuff of her collar, or from her cuff of her shirt, as well as over here. And then her hand is going into her pants. So again, this is totally bone dry, and I'm getting these fourth shadows with a hard, crisp edge. And up here at her chin, I want her chin to have a little cast shadow on the side of her neck. And then going down into her shirt. And let's take a look at everything here from the front. So I think this looks pretty good. I think at this point now, I'm ready to start doing texture and ink. Oh, we should do something with her shoes. For her shoes, what I'll do is I'll lay down a wash. I'll do light sand first, and then I'll use the craft brown for doing all of the shadowing on her shoes. And by the time we're done, they'll look like brown shoes. So as soon as I get my light sand on there, while it's wet, I'm going to put my craft brown right on top of it. And this will knock down the craft brown so it's not so stainy and dominating. But if you notice, I did not do the side of the heel of her shoe. What I'm going to do is I'm going to let this get bone dry, and we'll come and get that with only the craft brown, and it'll have a nice different kind of a tone to it. So now that the shoe is semi-dry, what I want to do is I want to come in here, get some of my shadowing. So this is from her little cast shadow from her jeans. This is the shadow side of her foot. That's where her big toe is. Just some basic shadowing. And then here where I was saying I didn't do anything on her heel. So now we'll get this outside edge of the stiletto with just craft, no blending with any other color. And then there's a little inside edge of the stiletto, and I'm going to do that with the light sand to give it a two-tone look, so you're seeing different angles of the stiletto of the shoe. And you can kind of see what's going on here from the front. Now to get ready for doing the color pencil, I want to come in with my Recollections marker, and anywhere where my